Congressional Record. However, if he chooses to do the latter, he must either pay the tax and file for a refund, which makes him eligible to go to the Court of Claims or the Federal District Court, or he can hold off paying the tax, thereby running the risk of paying additional interest penalties, and take the case to the United States Tax Court. But if he decides to go to either the Court of Claims or the Federal District Court, he becomes the plaintiff in a case against the IRS by virtue of having filed for a refund. And if he goes to tax court, he becomes the petitioner on the grounds that he is challenging the IRS's findings as set forth in its 90-day notice of discrepancy, which is sent out before one can petition to go to tax court. Thus, the burden of proof has shifted. Although the taxpayer is in essence the defendant by virtue of the fact he is contesting an IRS finding, in reality, he must prove that the government has made a mistake rather than the government having to prove that he had made a mistake. In short, the common law tradition that the taxing authority is presumptively correct takes precedence over the more familiar concept of innocent until proven guilty. As it stands now, the only civil cases in which the IRS is the plaintiff are those in which the ability to pay rather than the liability itself is in question. Included in this category are cases such as summons enforcement, suits to collect taxes, and erroneous refund suits. However, in view of the fact that those who go to tax court, the Court of Claims, or a federal district court are just as much on the defensive as those contesting their ability to pay, it seems only fair, logical and consistent to me that they also be compensated for their legal fees and litigation costs when they win the case. Accordingly, I plan to introduce at the appropriate time perfecting language to my bill, making it clear that it applies to victorious taxpayers in IRS cases as well as to successful defendants in other types of civil action filed by the federal government or any of its departments, agencies, or commissions. In response to the obvious question, that being how does one define victorious in an IRS case, it is my feeling that in cases where the court rules that the IRS is entitled to only a small part of what it has claimed, then the taxpayer should be compensated in direct proportion to the extent of his victory. Thus, if a taxpayer was able to prove 95% of the IRS's claims were unjustified, he would get back 95% of whatever the court determined was a reasonable amount for attorney's fees and other litigation expenses. Of course, there is always the question of how far this proportional compensation should be carried, and I think this should be explored further in subsequent hearings and discussions, but I feel the basic concept is sound, particularly since the IRS not only has all the resources of the federal government behind it, but is also entitled by law to a presumption of correctness at the outset. While on the subject of difficulties facing taxpayers who wish to contest claims being filed by the IRS, it should also be noted that if a person takes an eligible case, one involving less than $1,500, to the small tax case division of the tax court, he will save money in terms of attorney's fees and other costs, but by doing so, he gives up his right of appeal. Given the fact that roughly 25% of all decisions appealed by contesting taxpayers are eventually decided in their favor, it is important that the taxpayer, no matter how small his case, know that he can take his case to another court and without sacrificing his right to appeal, if he loses, be reimbursed for his legal expenses if he wins. Of course, the argument will be raised that such compensation will open the floodgates to litigation with the resultant swamping of our court system. However, I would like to again point out that by sending the 90-day notice of discrepancy, which gives the taxpayer the option of either paying up or going to court, the IRS is actually determining who can go to court. $160. With all the accumulated wisdom of 2 weeks as a junior member of the Consumer Subcommittee, I approach this audience of seasoned advertising men and women with a certain humility. I'm reminded of the intimidating tale of the good man whose sole significant experience throughout an otherwise uneventful life was living through this flood. He was a good man. When he died, he went directly to heaven and was greeted personally at the gate by St. Peter, who said to him, "Welcome. Not only does your good life entitle you to admittance here, but in addition, I am prepared to grant you as a bonus on reasonable request." "Well," the man said, "you may think this slightly peculiar, but I would like to tell everybody here about this flood." "That does seem a little strange," admitted St. Peter, "but I think it can be arranged." And the next day, lo and behold, the whole host of heavens were assembled in bleachers of cloud banks served by huge speakers. Just as our good man was prepared to ascend the podium to tell the tale, St. Peter motioned him aside. "There's just one thing before you go out there I think you ought to know. Noah is in your audience. Ever since I learned of my assignment to the Consumer Subcommittee, I have been boning up on advertising age. Now, after a 2-week cram course with Stan Cohen and E.B. West, I am ready to give you the benefit of my instant wisdom. In fact, I'd like to share with those of you who may have missed it a small but profoundly significant work of social criticism which appeared in the pages of last week's Advertising Age. It is a letter to the editor, and I read it to you in its entirety. To the editor, I am 12 years old and I watch a lot of TV. There are these 2 dumb commercials. One is where this guy says, "I think I've got a fever," but the thing is that the guy has thick gloves on. That guy must have a furnace for a head. The other commercial is that this guy's wife won't let him have more than a little coffee because they say it is keeping him up at night. The thing is that it is in the morning. How can that keep him up at night? My dad is in advertising and he told me to write this letter. I want you to know that I believe in self-regulation, especially when it's as big as this is. I am told that since the Consumer Subcommittee is bound to be mucking about in your business, you'd like to know how I feel about advertising. The truth is I love it. When it tells me what I want to know. When it tells me what I don't especially want to know, but does it with wit and style and imagination. And I love advertising when it kids itself and not me. On the other hand, advertising drives me up the wall. When it hammers incredible trivia at my kids and me, when it tries to pry open my psyche with intimation that a pill or a brew or vinyl upholstery will cure my anger. And advertising drives me up the wall when it chisels on the truth. I also hear that you'd like to know how I feel about more stringent regulation of advertising. I'm dead set against it. When it imposes mindless economic burdens on media already under ruthless assault from Whitehead in the White House. When it reflects some bureaucrat's notion of reducing competition to the bloodless, cold, sober recitation of raw facts. And I'm also against it when it fails to increase the consumer's sum total of usable information. But I'm for it if it can transform the FTC from a sour joke whose feeble cease and desist orders can be mocked until the offending ad campaign has been safely enshrined in the best read ads of the last decade. And I'm for regulation when it looks to the real world of communications psychology to devise remedies to rid the marketplace of the residual effects of deception and manipulation. And when regulation looks realistically at the impact of the market structure. Question by plaintiff's attorney. And we're starting off with the court and then question by plaintiff's attorney. All right, let's get the jury out and we'll proceed with the testimony. The jurors are in the jury box. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're now ready to resume. The people will call their next witness. Thank you, Your Honor. The people call Avril Crom. Please raise your right hand. You do solemnly swear the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. So help you God? I do. Please take the stand and state your name for the record. My name is Avril Crom. Spell your full name. Avrile Krom. Sit back and relax. Pull that microphone towards you if you would and speak right into it, okay? Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. Crom, have you testified previously in the matter of People versus Lyle and Eric Menendez? Yes. And was this on July 30, 1993? Yeah. I'm not sure of the date, but sounds right. But you recall that you testified previously? Yes. And on August 20, 1989, did you live in the proximity of 722 North Elm Street? Yes. This is in the city of Beverly Hills? Yes. And where did you live in relation to 722 North Elm Street? I live at 718 North Elm, which is next door. But there's one house in between. Is it on the same side of the street as 722 North Elm? Yes. Are there any houses in between? One. Your Honor, I have a photograph which I've shown to the defense. I would like it marked next in order, which I believe is 84. It has not been marked previously. All right, Ms. Crom, showing you what has been marked 84 for identification. I'd ask you to look at that picture and tell me, okay, from that picture, do you recognize your house anywhere on that picture? Yes. Could you put a little X with this blue marker that I'm handing you where your home is? Can you identify the Menendez home on that picture? Yes. Would you put an X1 where the Menendez home is? Thank you. Now, sometime around on the night of August 20, 1989, were you at your home? Yes. And is there a pointer up there? Why don't you go up there and look and see, Ms. Najira? Why don't you see? Ma'am, you can stay where you are. Your Honor, may I ask the witness to step down? Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to hand you this pointer, and I'm going to call your attention to what's been marked Exhibit 84. Can you show the jury where your home is on Exhibit 84? Pointing to the area of the X's? Yes. Can you show us in that picture where the Menendez home is? And that's where you've marked X1? Yes. And apparently at 10 in the evening on objection, leading, Your Honor, sustained. Were you in your home in the evening of August 20, 1989? Your Honor, I would ask that the prosecutor return to the podium. Is she going to be referring to this diagram? Yes, Your Honor. On that evening, where were you in your home at approximately 10? I was in my bedroom. Can you show us where on that picture that would be? My bedroom is in the back right here, Your Honor, indicating for the record the back there appears to be part of the house and the pool. I'm sorry, I was not in the guest house. I was in the back of my bedroom is back here. Okay, that's right before the pool. Is that right? Right. Indicating for the record that would be the area right before the pool. Yes. Thank you. You can sit down. Now, did you hear a noise that attracted your attention that night? Yes. And at approximately what time did you hear this noise? Around 10:20, between 10:10 and 10:20. Were you alone at the time, or were you with anyone? I was with my son. And did you have any other children at home at the time? My daughter was in her bedroom, which was in the front of the house. And was your daughter there all night, or did she leave at some time? She left. About how long after you heard the sound did your daughter leave? There wasn't a long time period. And was your daughter there all night, or did she leave at some time? She left. About how long after you heard the sound did your daughter leave? There wasn't a long time period. Do you recall about what time your daughter left your house? I think it was more or less the same time within a 10-minute span. So about what time do you think your daughter left your home? Do you know? It's been a while and I'm not terribly sure. I think it was around 10:10 or 10. And is that about the time that you heard the sound? No. I heard the sound like at 10:20. And do you recall testifying previously in this matter? Yes. And do you recall testifying previously in this matter that you heard the sounds about 10:10? It may have been that, yes. And now, can you describe for the jury what it was that you heard? It was a series of popping sounds. And when you say a series, can you describe it just a little bit more detail? Approximately how many? It sounded like definitely more than 6. Might have been 10, 12. And did you hear them all at the same time? Or did you hear them in? No, there was a time lag. I thought it was Chinese firecrackers because I heard a series of shots, and then there was a time lag, and then there was another series of shots. And the reason that I thought it was Chinese firecrackers is because the way that I'm used to it is that the fuse runs all the way across and they pop, and then it takes time for the flame to go down the string, excuse me, and then it knocks the next row. That's why I thought it was Chinese firecrackers. So your understanding is Chinese firecrackers pop, and then it takes a little time, and it pops again? Yes. Is that what this sounded like to you? Yes. And was your son present when you heard this? Yes. And did you have a conversation about these sounds that you heard? Yes. He went to the phone. Objection, hearsay. If it's going to elicit that, your answer was yes. The rest will be non-responsive. Your next question, please. Did you call the police when you heard these sounds, the poppings? No. My son picked up the phone and dialed 911, and I wouldn't let him call because I said it was ridiculous. It was Chinese firecrackers. When your son dialed 911, did you, the call I take it, didn't go through or didn't make that call? Objection, calls for speculation. I put the objections sustained. The answer is stricken. What happened when your son picked up the phone to dial 911? Objection, hearsay, overruled. I put the receiver down. Did you say anything at that point? Objection, hearsay, overruled. I said to him, why are you calling the police? So he said, they're gunshots. So I said, but it's not gunshots. He said, well, what else would it be? So I said, Chinese firecrackers. And he said, in August? And I said, yes, someone found them left over from July 4 and let them off. So he said, Mom, you're being silly. That's not Chinese firecrackers, that's gunshots. Was that pretty much the end of the conversation? That was it, yes. So did anyone from your house call the police that night? No. At some point that night, did you talk to the police? No, not that night. How about the next morning? Yes. And did you tell them about the sound that you heard? I didn't put the two together until the detective said, did you not see or hear anything? And then I saw my son's reaction and I realized what we had heard were actually gunshots, not the firecrackers that I thought they were. Did you mention this to the police the next morning? Yes. Did you? When you described it to the police, how did you describe what it was you heard? It was a series of popping and then the time lag and then another series of popping. Now, did you explain to the police about the time lag that morning or at a later time? I don't remember, quite honestly, if it was at that time or at a later time, but I definitely did tell them. And as you sit there now, do you believe that this was probably between 10 and 10:20? Yes. Thank you, ma'am. Nothing further. Thank you. Cross, I have a couple questions. Good morning. Hi. Do you still live there at 718 North Elm? Yes. That's a White House? Yes. Couple doors down. And the house next door to yours, between your house and the Menendez home, does someone live there? Yes. Do you still live there at 718 North Elm? Yes. That's a White House? Yes. Couple doors down. And the next door to yours, between your house and the Menendez home, does someone live there? Yes. Would you describe your neighborhood as fairly heavily populated? A lot of people live in houses that are pretty close together? Yes. And do you remember back in August the 20th, was it a warm night? Yes. Did you have your windows open? Yes. Now, do you remember what you were doing when you first heard these noises? Yes. What was it? I was actually talking to my son. There was a commercial on, and he was watching something on about an airplane crash that night, and then the commercials came on, and we were talking. Were you watching television with him? No, not really. Do you remember if this commercial came on just at the end of a program? I think it was in the middle of the program. And you don't remember what it was about. The program? Yes. It was about an airplane crash, I think. I mean, do you remember what it was? Was it a news broadcast or was it a show? No, I wasn't watching. He was watching, but I wasn't watching. How old is your son, or how old was he then? He was 12 at the time. Were you wearing a watch? Do you remember? Yeah. But I have a watch. My VCR has a clock timer right underneath the TV. And when you gave the time to the police, was that a time estimate? I was pretty conscious of the time because my daughter had to be home by 11:15, and her boyfriend, or a friend, a male friend of hers, was coming to pick her up or had just come to pick her up at that point. Okay, do you remember testifying in the last trial that you said your daughter, Jennifer, had to be back before 10:30? I remember. It was pretty. Yeah, I wasn't sure if it was 10:30 or 10:45 because she was negotiating the time with me. Okay, so your time's maybe 10, 15 minutes off? Yeah, not more. And these noises that you heard, that could have been at 10. Is that correct? No, I don't believe that they would have been at 10 because the friend that was picking her up was running late, and that was where the discrepancy came in because she said, could I stay a little bit longer? And I said, no, I want you back at 10:30. And we changed it to 11:45, kind of negotiating the time. When you were asked by the police the time that you heard these shots or these noises, you initially said something between 10 and 10:15, correct? I may have said that. All right. And were you estimating the time as far as the time that you heard these noises? You were giving a time estimate, is that correct? Yes. Now, did you know the Menendezes, the family? No. Had you ever had any contact with Jose or Kitty or Lyle or Eric Menendez? No. Do you remember a flyer coming around? Yes. And when was the flyer passed around? Objection, irrelevant, overruled. You can answer the question. It was a few months, you know. It's been so long that I think it was a few months prior to this. Did this flyer have something to do with the Menendez family? Somebody in the house was giving tennis lessons, and I suggested to my kids to go take tennis lessons there. Was it Lyle and Eric giving tennis lessons? Objection, hearsay. Do you know who it was who? I don't know, I don't. I want to ask you some questions about the sounds that you heard. You said you were in the back room of the main house? Yes. And you were there with your son? Yes. When you first heard the noises, did it sound to you like they were firecrackers? Yes. And did it sound to you like it was firecrackers because the sounds were very rapid in succession? Yes. I take it you weren't counting them as you heard them, just sounded like a lot of firecrackers? Yes. And then you heard some kind of a pause, which you felt was the fuse burning to the other side of the firecrackers? Yes. And then you heard some more? How much time would you say was between the first sound of popping noises to the second sound of popping noises? You know, I don't know. I didn't ever really think about it. I don't know. Was it just a few seconds? No. It was more than a few seconds. Ms. Crom, showing you what has been marked 84 for identification, I'd ask you to look at that picture and tell me, okay, from that picture, do you recognize your house anywhere on that picture? Yes. Could you put a little X with this blue marker that I'm handing you where your home is? Could you? Do you see, can you identify the Menendez home on that picture? Yes. Would you put an X1 where the Menendez home is? Thank you. Now, sometime around or the night of August 20, 1989, were you at your home? Yes. And is there a pointer up there? Why don't you go up there and look and see, Ms. Najira? Why don't you see? Ma'am, you can stay where you are, Your Honor. May I ask the witness to step down? Okay, thank you. Now, I'm going to hand you this pointer, and I'm going to call your attention to what's been marked Exhibit 84. Can you show the jury where your home is on Exhibit 84? Pointing to the area of the X's? Yes. Can you show us in that picture where the Menendez home is? And that's where you've marked X1, yes, and approximately at 10 in the evening on objection. Leading, Your Honor, sustained.